Hi, today we're going to do a code red and a code green. The code red is obvious, right? It's a fire drill. And I'm going to give you a brief explanation on how you should react. So we'll start out by if the bells start ringing, what are you to do? So we ask all the staff to do two steps. The first one is go to the panel and read it, and the second step is go to the location of the fire. So that's all staff do those two steps. Once you arrive at the location of the fire, then decisions will have to be made, and that's when the nurse on that unit has to take charge. So the nurse on the unit where the fire location is, she is the nurse that becomes the fire marshal. All the other nurses in the building, they're in charge of their own unit. So let's say the fire was on Ambleside. So the nurse on Ambleside then checks the panel, goes to the location. Once she arrives at the location, everybody else is arriving there, and she must be prepared to make decisions. That's why I always say the nurse should not start getting involved in making any other decisions. She's got to keep, actions, she's got to keep her brain free to make decisions. So you read the panel, you go to the location, and then the nurse decides, is the fire small enough that we can put it out? If it is, you're going to get somebody to grab an extinguisher right away and attempt to put the fire out. The next decision that almost happens at the same time is, you got to be telling people to move anybody who's in danger, right? And so who's ever closest to the fire must be removed. So then the nurse has to remember to do 3 tasks as well as making these decisions. And we have a little trick, and it's called 9, run, run. So the 9 will help you remember that you have to call 911. You must call 911, even though we have a monitoring station that does receive the bells ringing, and they phone the fire department. The nurse calling 911 ensures that call takes place, because you never know, maybe the phone lines go down or whatever. You want to make sure that the fire department are en route. Okay, the first run is sending a runner. So you're going to send a runner to all the other units, letting them know this is a real fire, this is the toaster, or whatever. You're going to give, that runner is going to give everybody else information. Because remember, everybody else in the building who has not arrived at the scene of the fire doesn't know what's going on. So that runner is going to let them know what's going on. The second run is your second runner. That second runner must grab the fireman keys and bring them to the front door. And so when the fire department arrive, they're going to be able to grab the keys. That person will take them to the fire. It will all help with the efficiency of things. So those keys are found at the Ambleside Nursing Center, station, so you can go there. Okay, so an extinguisher. So I'm sure everybody remembers, you put your finger in the little plastic tab and you twist it and pull. And then that allows you then to squeeze the trigger on the extinguisher. And when you do attempt to extinguish a fire, you point down at the base of the fire and you do a sweeping motion. Okay, and hopefully the fire will go out, and then, that's one less worry. But if the fire is too large and you can't put it out, you can shut the door. So then at least there's not as much oxygen going to that fire, and that will contain it for a little while. Every room has the door on the room will give you some time. Those are fire rated doors, so that will give you time to remove everybody to safety. So now the nurse is giving these directives out. All these people have arrived, and the nurse can be saying, okay, let's begin evacuation. The nurse can even tell someone to call 911 and give them information. The nurse assigns the runner. So the nurse is making all these decisions. So let's say the nurse does decide to evacuate. So let's go over evacuation. Evacuation is also known as code green. So we have a FlexiVac system in the building, and you guys are all familiar with that. You can see these little strips by every resident door, and the strips have a magnet at the end. So you enter the room and you check. You check the room thoroughly, including the washroom, the bathroom, because somebody could be in that bathroom and you don't want to say, oh, I've checked this room, put the FlexiVac strip across, and then there's a resident in there. So it's really important that you do check that room. Once you exit the room and you shut the door and then you put the little magnetic tab across, that room will not be re-entered. So critical that you do check it thoroughly. And be aware that there could be 2 people in one room. When the fire alarms go, especially on Bayside, if a resident's confused, they may enter a room and they may enter even the bathroom. So you may open the door, see one resident in there, take them out and not look in the bathroom, and that resident could be left in there. So as you exit the room, you put the FlexiVac strip across. If somebody were to re-enter that room, when you open the door, the magnet will release and the strip will go back down. So then you know that that room needs to be rechecked. If it's not across the door, then it needs to be rechecked. Okay, so that's a very good safety system. Okay, if the fire, let's say, is on Creekside, the next area that needs to be evacuated after Creekside would be the floor below, or the area below. So that will be that section in Ambleside that's below Creekside that would need to be evacuated next. The reason is because the floor doesn't have the same barrier that the units have. Fleetwood Place is actually 3 separate buildings. There's a fire barrier between each unit. So that's why if the fire is in Creekside, then you can just evacuate past the fire doors to another unit, and you've got, I think, a couple hours of safety. But you don't have that same amount of time for below, so that's why you want to do that. So if the fire was in Ambleside dining room, you would want to evacuate Creekside next. So one of the last things I want to talk about is reading the panel, because I know the panel can be confusing. And what they did when they set up the fire panel with the directions is there's 3 sections in the building. So that's why the panel only addresses 3 directions. Bayside, they assigned south. Creekside, they assigned north. And Dawnside, they assigned east. So even though Bayside, it's not just south, right? It turns a corner. They just assigned it to be south. And if you look at the walls, we have the letter S written on the wall, so that kind of jogs your memory. Below Bayside is also south, and you can see S's on the wall below as well. So if the panel says lower south, then you know it's Bayside and below. If it's upper south, it would be just the Bayside unit. If it's Creekside, it's called north, and if it's below Creekside, that would be lower north. And Dawnside is considered east, and then below Dawnside would be considered lower east. So that's how you read the panel. The other clues that you can be looking for on the panel is if it says smoke, then you know the fire was triggered by a smoke detector. So you can be looking up at the ceiling and you can actually see which smoke detector triggered that fire alarm. It's the little upside down caps, and it would have a bright red light, and that will tell you that's the one that triggered the alarm. If it says manual, then that means somebody has pulled the pull station. So you then can look to see which pull station was pulled. So then you know it was most likely a false alarm. A resident probably pulled it, unless a staff member pulled it because they saw a fire. And that could be a possibility. So it is tricky to read the panel. The easiest thing to read is if it's a room, because it just says B21 or A13. So it actually says it. It's the corridors that are the hardest to read, because it will say, let's say it was in Creekside on the west side, it will say upper southwest corridor, if it was that section in Bayside. So just kind of think about the directions when you're reading the panel, and you know, take a little bit of time, because you want to go to the right location. Also, the directions, or the direction of each unit is written right beside the panel, and it gives you some information if you need to refer to that. The last thing I'm going to go over is that every time the bells ring, the building is completely unlocked, and that's for safety purposes. So that means Bayside is at risk. So it's really important that 2 people always remain on Bayside when the alarms go off, because you kind of want to be watching both of the exit doors and making sure your residents are staying on the unit. And because the building is completely unlocked after, that means even the stairwells are open. So somebody could leave because maybe they're scared, and if you don't do a roll call, anytime the bells go off, you must do a roll call after, because somebody could have left, they could have gone onto another unit, they could have gone into the stairwell. You want to make sure that you're checking your residents after any type of a drill, or not a drill, but any type of with the bells ringing. Okay, that's a quick version of the fire drill. Hope you learned something and it all made sense. Thank you very much for your time.